The morning light barely touched the edges of the mansion when the maid quietly entered the kitchen. Her steps were soft, almost invisible, as she moved through the polished floors and shining countertops. The large house was alive with the sounds of early activity. The chefs in the kitchen were preparing breakfast, their chatter bouncing off the high ceilings. The scent of fresh bread and brewed coffee filled the air, but she moved past it all without pause. She had her own rhythm, a small routine that she followed every day, almost like a silent meditation. She had been working here for some time now, but she still preferred to stay in the background. There was a comfort in being unnoticed, a safety in blending in with the quiet hum of the household. She liked watching the life around her from a distance, noting how everyone moved, how the staff interacted, and how the residents went about their business. There was a sense of order in it all, a structure she could rely on. Her past was something she rarely thought about during these hours, though it lingered at the edges of her mind. She had faced moments of deep hurt, experiences that left shadows she carried silently. The world had not always been kind, and she had learned early on to guard her heart. Music had become her sanctuary. There was a simple tune she had learned long ago, a melody that seemed to smooth the jagged edges of her thoughts and bring a calmness she could not find elsewhere. She hummed it softly to herself as she worked, and it followed her through the rooms, gentle and unassuming. The staff moved around her, carrying trays, wiping counters, and adjusting flowers in vases. She knew where she belonged in this flow, and she moved like part of the rhythm, not calling attention to herself. Yet, there was a quiet confidence in her movements, a skill born of years of careful observation and practice. Every sweep of her broom, every folded towel, was done with a deliberate grace that went unnoticed, except perhaps by those who looked closely. She paused for a moment near a large window overlooking the garden. The morning sun spilled across the neatly trimmed lawns and blossoming flowers. Birds flitted from branch to branch, and she felt a small pang of longing for a life that was quieter, simpler. But she had chosen this path, or at least she had accepted it, finding safety in the predictable routine of service. Her music, her quiet humming, became a bridge to herself in these moments. It was as if the tune carried the weight of her past away, leaving only a gentle presence behind. Down the hall, the sound of hurried footsteps signaled the arrival of the mansion's owner, a figure whose presence commanded respect and attention. The CEO moved with precision and authority, each step measured, each expression controlled. Yet, beneath the surface of power, there was tension. She had noticed it on several occasions, fleeting moments where the mask of composure slipped, revealing a human being burdened by stress, perhaps even fear. She did not know his full story, nor did she need to. She only observed, her tune keeping her calm as she moved through her day. Her duties took her from room to room, dusting, tidying, and arranging. She had learned the layout of the mansion so well that her movements were instinctive, almost as if the house itself guided her. She worked quietly, humming her melody softly whenever the silence of a room pressed in too heavily. It was a personal ritual, one that reminded her that no matter the demands of the day, there was a space where she could breathe. In the library, she paused to adjust a stack of books, her fingers brushing the spines with care. The room was vast, filled with shelves that reached the ceiling, each holding volumes of knowledge and stories. The CEO often came here to read, to escape the pressures of his role, and she respected that. She never lingered when he entered, but she knew the importance of the space, and she moved in harmony with it. The tune she hummed here felt softer, gentler, as if it were meant to blend with the rustle of pages and the quiet tapping of a keyboard from the adjacent study. She recalled how music had first come to her. As a child, it had been a secret refuge, something she could retreat into when the world became too loud or frightening. The melody she now hummed was a remnant of those times, a thread connecting her present to a past that was both painful and formative. She had learned to rely on it, to let it guide her through moments of uncertainty. Now, in the grand halls of this mansion, it served the same purpose, providing a sense of calm amidst the busy pace of life around her. As she moved to the dining room, she caught sight of the CEO briefly through the doorway. He was reviewing papers, his brow furrowed, the weight of decisions pressing heavily on him. She did not interrupt, merely allowed herself a glance, and then continued her work. Yet, her melody followed him, a soft, invisible presence that seemed to touch even the edges of his tension. She did not know it, but her music had a quiet power, one that went unnoticed by the world but lingered in the air, soothing without drawing attention. The day continued with its familiar rhythm. Meals were served, rooms were cleaned, and the mansion moved with a life of its own. She found small moments to hum her tune, especially when the noise and activity threatened to overwhelm her. Each note was a gentle reminder that she could hold herself together, that she could navigate the demands of her life with grace. She had become attuned to the subtle dynamics of the household, aware of moods, tensions, and unspoken needs. In the afternoon, the quiet moments became more noticeable. The mansion was less crowded, the staff taking breaks or moving to quieter spaces. She found herself near the grand piano in the sitting room, a place she seldom used but often admired. She ran her fingers over the keys softly, playing fragments of her melody, letting the notes float through the room. It was a private ritual, one that carried her through memories of hardship and moments of solace. The music was a bridge between her inner world and the life she inhabited now. The CEO, at times, wandered near the sitting room, unaware of the source of comfort that would soon play a role in his own life. He moved through the mansion with his usual focus, his mind occupied with decisions and responsibilities. Yet, even the briefest encounter with her music left a subtle impression, a softening of the edge of stress that he carried. He did not question it, nor did he seek to understand it, but it became a faint thread of calm in his otherwise tense days. Evening approached and the mansion shifted again. The staff began preparing for dinner, the rooms glowing with warm lights and the soft clatter of dishes. She continued her duties, ensuring everything was in order, the melody never leaving her lips. It had become part of the environment, an unnoticed companion that carried both her own peace and, unknowingly, the first hints of solace to another. As she paused near the doorway to the CEO's study, she noticed the slight slump in his posture, the fatigue that even authority could not conceal. She hummed a little louder, letting the tune linger in the space, filling the corners with calmness. It was instinctive, a gesture of quiet care she could not fully name. She had no idea that these simple notes, born of her own need for healing, would one day touch a life in ways she could never imagine. The night settled over the mansion, a deep quiet replacing the day's activity. She finished her final tasks, the melody winding down with her movements. There was a stillness now, a pause in which the house seemed to breathe alongside her. She felt the small satisfaction of completing her work, of moving through her day with purpose and quiet dignity. Her music, ever present, had carried her through another day, as it always had, a reminder that even in silence, there was life and resilience. She retreated to her small room, a space that was hers alone, where she could finally exhale and allow herself to rest. The soft hum of her melody lingered in her mind, a gentle thread connecting past, present, and the promise of tomorrow. She lay down, letting her thoughts drift, unaware that the tune she cherished so privately would soon find a place in another person's life, carrying with it the first seeds of hope and connection that neither of them had yet imagined. The CEO started his day early, before anyone else was awake. The mansion was quiet and he liked it that way. The silence gave him space to think, to plan, and to deal with the pressure that weighed heavily on him. From the outside, he seemed confident, always composed, a person in control. But inside, the constant stress, the responsibility, and the unending expectations wore on him. He often felt alone, even when surrounded by people. He had tried to handle it in many ways. He went to meetings with advisors, discussed problems with friends, even tried therapy and meditation. Nothing seemed to fully help. Nights were the hardest. Lying in a room that should have felt peaceful, he found his mind racing, thoughts of failure, fear, and doubt crowding his mind. There were moments when he felt hopeless, when the weight of everything seemed unbearable. No one knew this about him. It was a secret he carried, a private burden. On this particular morning, He moved through the mansion in his usual sharp, precise way, checking documents, reviewing plans, making decisions. His mind was busy with numbers, deadlines, and meetings. The staff moved around him, giving him the space he demanded, but he felt a strange emptiness. The mansion, filled with people and activity, seemed silent in a way that made him feel even more isolated. As he worked in the study, he began to hear a faint sound from the other side of the hallway. It was soft, almost imperceptible, but it had a gentle rhythm that caught his attention. At first, he thought it was the wind or some mechanical noise, but then it became clearer. A melody, soft and soothing, floated through the air. It was delicate, simple, and strangely comforting. He stopped for a moment, unsure why it affected him so strongly. The tune was unfamiliar, yet it felt like it belonged somewhere deep inside him. It brought a strange calm, a pause in the tension that had gripped him for months. He listened without moving, letting the notes reach him. Each sound seemed to loosen the tightness in his chest, as if someone had reached in and allowed him to breathe for the first time in a long while. He didn't know who was playing it, but he wanted to hear more. The melody continued, faint and persistent, leading him on a path through the mansion. He wandered down the hallway, drawn by the sound. It was so soft that if he had been in a hurry, he would have missed it entirely. But this morning he was alert to everything, and the music pulled him forward. His steps slowed, and for the first time that day his mind quieted. The heavy thoughts that always accompanied him in the morning seemed to recede, leaving space for something different, something he could not name. The source of the music remained out of sight. He walked past rooms and open doors, peeking in when he thought he might see the player. But each time there was nothing obvious. The mansion was large, with many hidden corners and quiet spaces. The melody floated above the usual household noises, soft and steady. It was unlike anything he had heard before, and he felt a strange attachment to it, a pull he could not explain. Meanwhile, the maid went about her morning, humming her melody without realizing its effect on anyone. She had learned to use it for herself, to calm her own anxious thoughts, to find a sense of peace when the world felt overwhelming. It had become a habit, a personal ritual she could not go without. Today, it traveled farther than she expected, touching someone else in a way she could never have predicted. The CEO paused at the door to the sitting room. There she was, the source of the melody, playing softly on the piano. She was unaware of his presence, focused entirely on the music and the rhythm that brought her comfort. Her fingers moved gently, creating notes that were simple, yet full of feeling. He watched silently, hesitant to interrupt, afraid of breaking the fragile calm that the melody had created. He felt a strange mix of emotions, curiosity, relief, and even a sense of longing. The music seemed to speak to him in a way that words could not. It carried an unspoken understanding, a quiet sympathy that he had not experienced from anyone else. He remained hidden, not wanting to startle her, simply letting the sound fill the room and his mind. For the first time in a long while, he felt less alone. Over the next few days, the pattern repeated itself. The maid played her melody while cleaning or tidying rooms, and the CEO, drawn by the music, would find himself nearby, listening. Sometimes he would catch brief glimpses of her, but mostly he stayed unseen. He found himself waiting for these moments, small pockets of calm in an otherwise overwhelming life. He never asked her to play for him. He did not know her well, and he was wary of imposing, but he could not deny the effect it had on him. The maid noticed him occasionally glancing in her direction, but she did not understand the significance. To her, he was just another person moving through the mansion, occupied with his own world. Yet, there was a subtle tension she felt, a presence that seemed to linger even when he was not in the room. Her tune, a private habit, had become an invisible bridge between them, unspoken and unnoticed in other ways. One afternoon, the CEO lingered longer than usual near the sitting room. The melody had begun again, soft and flowing. He stepped closer, still careful to remain unseen. The music wrapped around him like a blanket, soothing and steady. Memories and feelings he had tried to push away began to surface. The weight he carried seemed lighter, as if the melody had taken some of it and held it gently. He closed his eyes, letting the sound fill the space inside him, calming the chaos that had become his constant companion. In another part of the mansion, the maid hummed softly as she moved from room to room. She had no idea how much her music was affecting someone else. It was always personal, a way to navigate her own feelings, to keep herself grounded. But now it was doing more than that. Unseen, her presence was touching another life, offering relief in ways she could never have imagined. Evenings were the hardest for the CEO, but the melody followed him into the quiet hours. It became a thread of comfort, a reminder that there was softness in the world, even amid pressure and responsibility. He did not know the person behind it, but he felt a growing sense of trust in the sound itself. It became something he looked forward to, a rare and precious moment of peace. The maid, unaware of the impact she was having, continued her routine. She moved through the rooms with care, arranging flowers, dusting surfaces, and keeping the mansion in order. Her music remained a constant companion, a simple, quiet expression of resilience and hope. It was a part of her identity, a piece of her past that she carried into the present. And now, unknowingly, it was helping someone else carry their own burden. Days turned into weeks, and the connection between them, though unspoken, deepened. The CEO began to rely on these small moments of music more than he realized. The maid, continuing her work without fanfare, remained unaware of the difference she was making. Life in the mansion went on, with its routines, responsibilities, and expectations, but within it, a quiet bond was forming, fragile and unspoken, carried by a simple melody that had once only been her solace. One morning, he paused outside her room before she began her tune. He felt a strange gratitude, a sense that this small, gentle act of hers was giving him more than anything else he had tried to find. He wanted to understand, to connect, but he did not know how. For now, he simply listened, letting the music ease the tension in his body and mind. It was enough to make him feel alive, even for a few moments. The maid, preparing for her day, hummed the melody as always. She felt calm, centered, and ready to face the tasks ahead. She had no idea that her song was not just helping her, but someone else too, someone who had been struggling in silence for longer than she could imagine. The tune was a bridge between two worlds, a quiet force of healing that neither fully understood yet. By evening, the mansion was again filled with the gentle sounds of life winding down. The CEO returned to his private spaces, carrying with him the calm that the music had brought. He reflected on the strange comfort he found in these moments, realizing that something small and unassuming could have an immense impact. The melody, simple yet profound, had begun to touch parts of him that had been closed off for years. The maid finished her work, the last notes of her tune fading with her movements. She felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of order restored, a balance maintained. She did not know that her music had become a lifeline, even if an invisible one, to someone who needed it more than she could ever know. Her past pain, her quiet rituals, and her unassuming presence had created a space of comfort and healing without intention or expectation. It was a beginning, a small but powerful intersection of two lives, carried by a melody that spoke more than words ever could. The days moved slowly, yet in a rhythm that neither of them could control. The CEO found himself noticing the tune more and more, the simple melody that floated through the mansion and softened the sharp edges of his life. It had become something he could not ignore. Even when work was overwhelming, even when deadlines pressed and decisions weighed heavily on him, the tune acted as a gentle reminder that there was calmness somewhere, and it called to him in a way he could not fully understand. He began to make small adjustments to his day without consciously realizing it. Meetings he had once rushed into, he now approached with a slight pause, listening to the subtle music that seemed to reach him wherever he went. Even when he was in the midst of important conversations, the memory of the tune lingered in the corners of his mind, giving him a strange steadiness. It was impossible to measure its effect, but he knew it was there, a quiet comfort he had not anticipated. The maid, unaware of the impact she had, continued with her work as always. She moved through the mansion, cleaning, arranging, and tidying, her melody a constant companion. She hummed softly as she dusted shelves and straightened cushions, each note carrying a sense of peace she had cultivated for herself. It was instinctive, automatic even, yet the music had grown into something larger than she could have imagined. It was reaching beyond her, touching someone else's life without intention or expectation. Several times, the CEO caught glimpses of her as she worked, but mostly he stayed hidden, allowing the sound to reach him without interruption. There was something in her quiet presence, something that invited calm without needing words. He felt a growing curiosity about her, a desire to know who she was and how someone so unassuming could create such an effect. Yet, he also felt hesitation. He was not used to being vulnerable, not in front of anyone, and he feared that approaching her might break the fragile comfort he had found. The mansion, with all its vast rooms and busy staff, seemed to shrink in those moments of music. The CEO felt as though the melody created a private space, a bubble of quiet amid the activity. The tension he carried day after day began to soften in those moments. He could almost forget the demands of work, the pressure to perform, the relentless expectation of perfection. The music allowed him to breathe, to feel a connection he had not realized he was missing. As the days passed, these encounters became more frequent, more intense in their effect. One morning, the CEO lingered near the sitting room longer than usual. The tune was flowing from the piano, gentle and unhurried. He stepped closer, careful to remain unseen. The notes wrapped around him, and he closed his eyes, letting the music wash over the tightness in his chest. For a few minutes, he felt free from the weight he carried. It was an unexpected relief, a rare moment of peace. The maid, humming and playing, moved with an ease born of routine. She was unaware that the CEO was nearby, experiencing something profound in her private ritual. To her, it was a personal expression, a way to keep herself grounded, a connection to her own past. The melody had been her companion through hard times, a thread of comfort that she now offered unknowingly to someone else. Her awareness was limited to her own world, yet her music was beginning to build a bridge between their lives. On another day, the CEO noticed something different. The melody seemed to change slightly, as if she were responding to something he could not see. There was a subtle shift in the notes, a softness that felt deliberate yet natural. He could not explain why it affected him so deeply. The tune spoke without words, conveying a sense of understanding and compassion that he had not experienced in years. He felt a strange sense of hope, fragile yet undeniable. The maid, unaware of the growing impact, continued her work with dedication. She moved from room to room, each note of her melody carrying a sense of calm that had become second nature to her. It was a private act, a habit she could not go without, yet its reach had expanded beyond what she could imagine. She had no idea that her small, unassuming gestures were quietly influencing another life in ways she could not see. One afternoon, the CEO followed the melody with careful steps, letting it guide him through the mansion. He found himself pausing outside her room, listening as she played the piano softly. Her fingers moved over the keys with a gentle confidence, producing a tune that was simple, yet full of depth and feeling. He remained hidden, unsure of whether to reveal himself. The music had created a connection, but it was delicate, unspoken, and he did not want to disturb it. The days stretched into weeks, and the pattern repeated. The melody became a lifeline for the CEO, a thread of comfort and calm in an otherwise overwhelming life. He began to notice the small details of the mansion more, the subtle movements of staff, the arrangement of objects, and even the quiet expressions of those around him. It was as if the music had opened his senses, allowing him to see the world in a slightly different way, with more patience, more attention, and a growing empathy he had not expected to feel. The maid remained unaware, continuing her duties with her usual quiet determination. She hummed and played, finding solace in the routine, a small comfort in her otherwise busy days. Yet, the effect of her actions extended beyond her own life, touching the CEO in ways that were invisible yet profound. The connection between them, though silent and unseen, grew stronger. A subtle bond formed through the language of music. One evening, the CEO lingered in the sitting room longer than usual. The melody flowed gently from the piano, soft and unhurried. He felt a wave of calm wash over him, a sense of peace he had not experienced in months. The weight of responsibility, the constant pressure, seemed to lift slightly, replaced by a quiet clarity. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that help could come in unexpected forms, that solace could be found in the smallest, simplest gestures. The maid, unaware of the profound effect she was having, continued to play, her attention focused entirely on the music. Each note was a reflection of her own resilience, her quiet strength, and her desire to maintain balance in a world that often felt unpredictable. She had no idea that the tune she cherished for herself was now a source of healing for someone else, someone whose struggles were as deep as her own had once been. The CEO began to recognize a pattern. Whenever he heard the melody, he felt lighter, calmer, more grounded. He started seeking these moments, allowing the music to guide him through the stress of his work and the tension of his life. He did not know the maid personally, but her presence, even when unseen, became a source of quiet comfort. The simple act of listening, of being present in the moment with her music, provided relief that no other method had been able to achieve. Meanwhile, the maid continued her routine, unaware of the impact of her music. She moved through the mansion, her hands busy with tasks, her mind focused on the rhythm of her melody. It was a personal ritual, a private sanctuary she carried with her through each day. She had no idea that it was also becoming a source of healing for someone else, a quiet lifeline that connected their lives in ways neither could fully understand. The days passed, and the subtle connection grew. The CEO, though still burdened by responsibility and stress, found moments of relief and calm through the melody. The maid, focused on her work and her personal need for comfort, continued to play, unaware of the role she was playing in someone else's life. The music, simple and unassuming, had become a bridge, a channel of empathy and understanding that transcended words and appearances. One morning, as the maid began her melody, the CEO paused outside her room, listening intently. The tune seemed to reach deeper into him than ever before, easing the tension in his chest and bringing a sense of peace he had not known he needed. He realized that this connection, though silent and unseen, had become an essential part of his life, a source of strength that he could rely on. The melody had become more than music. It was a lifeline, a subtle reminder that solace and understanding could be found in the most unexpected places. The maid, focused on her own world, continued to play, unaware of the profound effect she was having. Her routine, her melody, and her quiet presence had unknowingly created a bond between them, fragile yet powerful. The music was a language they both understood, even if they had not yet exchanged a single word. It was a bridge of comfort, a shared experience that carried hope, healing, and the promise of something more. The CEO had begun to notice something in the way he felt whenever he heard the melody. It was no longer just a pleasant distraction. It had become essential. Days when he did not hear it felt heavier, longer, and more exhausting. The tune seemed to carry a piece of calm that he could not find anywhere else. He started to wonder about the person behind it. Who played this music? How did someone so quiet manage to create such peace? One morning, he decided to follow the sound more directly. He did not want to startle her, but he had to know who was behind the melody that had become a lifeline. The notes were soft and flowing, floating through the hallway, and he moved carefully, guided by them. As he approached the sitting room, he saw her for the first time up close. She was playing the piano with a gentle focus, her fingers moving over the keys with a quiet grace. She did not notice him. She was entirely immersed in the music, humming softly along with the notes. He paused at the doorway, unsure whether to enter. His heart raced, but there was also a strange sense of relief, as if seeing her made the melody more real, more tangible. She was ordinary in every visible way, yet the music she played was extraordinary. He could not have predicted that someone so quiet, so reserved, could have such an effect on him. The emotions he had carried alone for so long felt lighter just being in her presence. For several minutes he stood silently, listening. Each note seemed to speak directly to him, conveying understanding and calm without words. He felt the tension in his shoulders ease, the tightness in his chest loosen. It was as if the melody carried away the burden he had been dragging for years. He wanted to speak, to express his gratitude, but he feared that words might break the fragile peace that the music created. The maid eventually finished playing and looked up, startled to see him standing there. There was a moment of surprise, followed by a quiet curiosity on both sides. The CEO took a cautious step forward, offering a small, genuine smile. He wanted to say so much, but he began simply. "Your music. It helps me." She blinked, unsure what to say. She had no idea that her private melody had reached someone else, let alone affected him so deeply. The realization left her both amazed and hesitant. I play it for myself," she said softly. "I never imagined it could do anything for someone else." He nodded, understanding, but still searching for the words to explain the relief and calm she had brought into his life. "It does," he said simply. "More than anything else I've tried. I feel lighter when I hear it. It's like the tension I carry disappears for a while." She was quiet for a moment, absorbing his words. There was a sense of connection forming, fragile yet undeniable. She had known what it was like to feel burdened by the past, to carry pain quietly and alone. Now, she realized that her music, her small act of self-care, had reached someone who also needed comfort. It was an unexpected and profound connection, one that neither of them had sought but both were grateful for. He took another step closer, careful to respect her space. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice low and sincere. "I've never felt this way before. It's like someone finally understands, even without speaking." Her fingers rested on the piano keys, the melody lingering in her mind. "I'm glad it helps," she said quietly. I didn't know it could. I play it when I feel overwhelmed, when the world feels too heavy." He nodded, understanding the quiet struggle behind her words. "I know what you mean," he said. "I thought I could handle everything myself. But hearing your music, it's like a lifeline I didn't know I needed." For the first time, they shared a moment of vulnerability. There were no distractions, no tasks or expectations. Just the two of them, connected through the unspoken language of the melody. The CEO felt a sense of trust growing, a willingness to let down his guard. She, in turn, felt a cautious sense of hope, realizing that her private act had a meaning beyond her own world. He lingered, speaking softly. "I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know what your music does. It's not just notes. It's peace. It's relief. It's hope." She smiled faintly, a mixture of surprise and warmth. "I've always played it for myself, but maybe it was meant to be heard by someone else too." The room fell into a comfortable silence. Words were unnecessary. The bond formed through the music spoke louder than anything they could say. They both understood that this connection was fragile and special, a gift neither had anticipated but both cherished. Over the next few days, their interactions remained gentle and quiet. The CEO would linger near the sitting room, listening, sometimes offering a simple word of thanks. The maid continued her routines, aware now that her music had a profound effect but careful not to let it change the natural flow of her life. There was no rush, no pressure, only a developing understanding and mutual respect. The CEO began to feel the subtle changes within himself. He was calmer during meetings, more patient with his staff, and able to approach challenges with renewed focus. The tension that had been a constant companion was still present, but it was tempered by the quiet reassurance of the melody. It was no longer just a sound. It was a source of grounding, a reminder that relief and connection could exist even in the most unexpected circumstances. For the maid, there was also a shift. Knowing that her music was helping someone else added a new sense of purpose to her daily routines. She felt a quiet pride, a confirmation that her small, careful actions could matter beyond her immediate world. It was not about recognition or reward, but about understanding that even simple gestures could have a profound impact on another human being. One afternoon, the CEO paused outside the sitting room while she played. He took a deep breath, feeling the tension ease from his shoulders. "Thank you," he said softly, not as a formal acknowledgement, but as a genuine expression of relief and gratitude. She nodded, returning a quiet smile, and continued to play. The room was filled with the melody, but also with a sense of mutual understanding, a bond that needed no words. Their lives, once separate and silent in their own struggles, had begun to intersect in a meaningful way. The music was the first bridge, the first step toward trust and connection. They did not need to rush, did not need to speak of the past or the future, only to be present with each other in the moment. The simple act of sharing this space, of hearing and feeling without interruption, was enough to create a sense of hope and possibility. Even as the mansion bustled with activity, there were these quiet moments of connection. The CEO no longer felt entirely alone in his struggles, and the maid no longer felt that her efforts existed only in her own world. The melody had created a shared understanding, a language of calm and support that neither had expected but both welcomed. It was a beginning, fragile and delicate, but filled with the promise of healing and growth. As evening approached, they lingered in the quiet room together, the last notes of the piano fading gently. There was no need for conversation. The silence spoke volumes. Both felt the weight of their lives lighten slightly, carried away by the simple power of music and shared presence. In that moment, a bond had formed, one that would quietly influence the days ahead, a connection built not on words, but on understanding, empathy, and the unspoken power of melody. The CEO left the room with a sense of calm he had not felt in months. He carried the memory of the melody and the presence of the maid with him, a private reassurance that there was comfort and understanding in the world. The maid continued her evening tasks, her heart lighter, her music more meaningful knowing it had reached someone in need. Together, though separated by space and circumstance, they had created a subtle but profound connection, one that promised healing, hope, and the quiet strength found in truly being seen and understood. The days after their first conversation passed with a quiet familiarity that neither of them had expected. The CEO continued his work with the weight of responsibility pressing on him, but now there was a small comfort he could rely on. He had discovered the source of the melody, and knowing who played it made the world seem slightly less heavy. There was a subtle shift in him, a softness that was noticeable in the way he moved through the mansion, in the calm he carried into meetings, and in the way he responded to challenges. The maid, meanwhile, continued her routines with her usual dedication. Her days were busy, filled with tasks that required attention and care. Yet, there was a quiet warmth in her heart now, a knowledge that her music had found someone who needed it. She hummed softly as she worked, feeling a gentle pride and a sense of connection she had never experienced before. The melody had become more than a personal refuge. It had grown into a bridge that connected her to another human being, someone whose life was also touched by hardship and need. The CEO found himself seeking moments to hear the music, even in the midst of his demanding schedule. Sometimes he would pause outside the sitting room, listening for the familiar tune, feeling the calm it brought wash over him. Other times, he would catch the soft hum as she moved through the hallways, her presence a quiet reassurance in an otherwise overwhelming environment. He began to notice how much this connection mattered to him, how much he had come to rely on the subtle peace her music provided. The maid, for her part, continued to play for herself, unaware of the precise impact she had. She had no expectations, no desire for recognition, only the simple act of creating music that soothed her own mind. Yet, the effect it had on the CEO was undeniable. He began to show signs of change that those around him noticed. A lighter step, calmer expressions, and a sense of steadiness that had been missing before. The music had given him something he could not find elsewhere, and it was a gift he did not take lightly. One afternoon, the CEO lingered near the piano as she played. He watched quietly, appreciating the care and attention she put into each note. There was a grace in her movements, a quiet strength that had always been present, but was now illuminated by the role her music played in his life. He felt a profound gratitude, a desire to express it, but words seemed inadequate. The melody itself spoke volumes, conveying feelings he could not put into sentences. The maid noticed his presence this time, but there was no tension, no hesitation. She understood, in some instinctive way, that he had come to find comfort in the music, that her simple act had created a shared space of peace. She smiled faintly, continuing to play, allowing the music to flow naturally. There was no need for formal conversation. The bond was understood in silence, in the gentle rise and fall of the notes, in the unspoken empathy between them. In the following days, their connection grew in subtle ways. The CEO began to open up in small moments, sharing glimpses of his struggles with her, revealing a vulnerability he had rarely shown to anyone. The maid listened, her presence steady and reassuring, her music a constant thread of calm. She did not offer solutions or advice. She simply listened and allowed her melody to carry the weight of unspoken support. It was enough to create a sense of healing, a quiet understanding that bridged the gap between their worlds. The mansion, once just a place of work and routine, had become a space of subtle transformation. The CEO moved through it with a new awareness, more patient with staff, more attentive to the details of his life, and more mindful of the moments that mattered. The maid continued her daily tasks, yet there was a new lightness in her movements, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that her music had meaning beyond herself. Their lives, once separate and burdened, were now intertwined in a gentle, sustaining rhythm. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the CEO lingered in the sitting room longer than usual. The melody floated through the air, soft and soothing. He felt a wave of calm wash over him, the tensions of the day dissolving into the gentle notes. He realized how much he had come to rely on these moments, how deeply the music had become a part of his life. It was more than sound. It was a lifeline, a source of grounding and reassurance that he could carry forward into the challenges ahead. The maid continued to play, her focus entirely on the music, yet, aware of his presence, she felt a subtle sense of purpose, a quiet joy in knowing that her private act of solace had reached someone who needed it. The melody had grown beyond her own needs, becoming a shared experience that offered hope, comfort, and connection. There was a mutual understanding between them, a sense that they could face the world with a little more strength because of this invisible yet powerful bond. Over time, the CEO began to recover in ways that were noticeable not just to himself, but to those around him. His focus sharpened, his decisions became clearer, and the anxiety that had once plagued him lessened. The music had become a source of resilience, an anchor in moments of uncertainty. He did not take this for granted, and his gratitude toward the maid was deep, though unspoken. The bond they shared through the melody had given him something that no amount of advice or strategy could provide. The maid, too, experienced a transformation. She moved through her work with a newfound confidence, her heart lighter knowing that she had made a difference. Her music, once a private refuge, had become a subtle force of healing, a reminder that small acts could create profound effects. She understood that her presence, her care, and her dedication could impact lives in ways she had not imagined. It was a quiet triumph, a recognition that even the simplest gestures held power. One day, the CEO approached her as she finished playing. He did not speak at first, only offered a small nod of appreciation, a gesture that carried all the words he could not find. She smiled in return, understanding the meaning behind it. There was no need for a lengthy conversation. The connection was clear, built on trust, empathy, and the shared experience of the melody that had brought them together. They began to share moments more openly, though still quietly and gently. Sometimes it was a word, sometimes a glance, and often it was simply the shared presence in the room as the melody flowed. The CEO no longer felt entirely alone in his struggles, and the maid no longer felt that her efforts existed only in her own world. The music had created a bridge, a channel of understanding that transcended words and appearances. It was a space where both could feel supported, seen, and valued. As the weeks turned into months, the mansion became a place of quiet healing. The CEO found strength in the music and in the subtle friendship that had formed. The maid discovered the joy of knowing that her small acts could have a meaningful impact. Together, they navigated the challenges of daily life with a new sense of balance and hope. The melody, once a private act of comfort, had become a shared lifeline, a source of resilience and trust that neither could have anticipated. Evenings were filled with the gentle rhythm of life winding down, the soft hum of the melody carrying through the halls. The CEO felt a peace he had not known in years, a sense that he could face the pressures of his work and life with renewed strength. The maid moved through her tasks with purpose and calm, her heart lifted by the knowledge that her music had reached someone in a meaningful way. The mansion, once just a place of work, had become a sanctuary of understanding, empathy, and quiet connection. In the quiet moments, when the day had ended and the world outside seemed distant, they would share the room together, the music flowing around them, speaking for them in ways words could not. There was no need for grand gestures or dramatic declarations. The bond between them was simple, profound, and enduring. It was built on the understanding that small, sincere acts of care could change lives, that even in silence, one could offer hope and healing. In the end, the CEO and the maid had found something rare, a connection that transcended the ordinary, a shared peace that was stronger than the struggles of life. The melody that had begun as a private refuge for one had become a source of strength for both. They had discovered that human connection, empathy, and quiet acts of kindness could transform lives, offering hope, resilience, and the knowledge that no one has to face the world entirely alone. And so, their lives continued, intertwined in subtle ways, carried forward by the music that had brought them together. Each day, the melody flowed through the mansion, a gentle reminder of healing, trust, and the quiet power of understanding. The CEO had found relief, the maid had found purpose, and together they had discovered the enduring truth that even the smallest acts of care can create profound and lasting change.